Welcome, everybody, to our next session. What are the consequences of exceptional integrated customer engagement? Well, they've got to be beneficial, that's for sure, because every brand in the life science space is taking many, many tactics to market to go ahead and engage customer. We talk about omni-channel engagement, surround sound marketing, all of these great things, but it's very important for us to go ahead and parse out what should we do, how should we do it, and how will we know if it is working? So we've brought together some really great minds today to talk a bit about the strategies, the tactics, the tips, the tools, the tricks to help us make sure that wherever we fall into the organizational chart, that we're a part of creating an exceptional integrated customer engagement experience, that's for sure. Our first expert is no other than Erin Riley, who is running sales operations and analytics at Evofem Biosciences. I've known Erin for many, many years. She knows how to turn data into insights. Erin, warm welcome. Welcome to the
I'm so excited to be here, Frank. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, it's great to see you. I'm just so excited to be here with you.
So, I'm a little thinner than last time you saw me, which is good.
Well, with COVID, I can tell you that I am going in a direction that's not a part of my goal list. That is for sure. I've got to work on that. But Erin, I know your background, but not everyone does. Let's get to know Erin Riley. Tell us a little bit about your professional past.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, so my path to operations is a little different than most people for sure. I started my career a million years ago in sales, carrying the bag. So I have the sales rep mentality still day to day. And then I went to sales management and got pulled into operations because I was a data geek. So that was kind of how I got sucked into it. But I still had that sales lens, that sales management lens. And I was in marketing for a couple of years too. So even though I've been in operations for a little while, more than a decade, I still have that sales heart at everything that I do. So I still bring that sales lens. So that's kind of, even though I'm in director of sales operations and analytics here at Evofem, and I've worked at retail companies, I've worked at long-term care data, products, I've worked with specialty products in hemophilia and growth hormone. So I kind of bring a slightly different lens that I kind of have jack of all trades, master of nothing.
Well, you're going to bring mastery to this session. I'm really looking forward to it because I know it's something that you're really good at. There's so many things, so many efforts that we put forward when it comes to commercialization and beyond, but how do we turn that into something insightful and actionable? And you're great at it. So I can't wait to share this time with you. And next up, we're going to bring just millimeters away from each other here on the screen, but just, I think, 8 miles away from me right now in the greater Boston area is Jim Wentworth, VP of Sales at Cipla. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Frank, so much. And welcome, Erin.
Jim, it's great to have you. Just like we did with Erin, we all want to get to know each other a bit. Yeah. I know your background at Sanofi and beyond, but why don't you tell everybody about kind of like what you're up to, what experiences have you honed over the years?
Yeah, so let's start with my accent. So yes, I am from Massachusetts, so I will bring that into the conversation. And since we're talking about the COVID, I weigh less. I'm just not thinner. So I've actually lost weight in the COVID, 11 pounds, but I just can't seem to take the weight off. It's just kind of crazy on the look. But no, thank you for having me, and it's very nice to meet you. So I would say that my career background is very similar to Erin's, but where she went off into the operational side, I ended up probably spending most of my career in market access and reimbursement. But like Erin, I left Syracuse University. I went into the beverage industry, spent 6 years, I think, with Pepsi-Cola. And then I jumped into the industry in 1997. I also carried the bag for Herx, Marion, Roussel as the company that I started with. And I stayed with that organization for 22 and a half years. And I was in marketing. I was a field leader, regional business director. But then probably more than half of my time was in market access. So I was payer marketing. I was reimbursement, went back out and led a couple of teams. And when I left Sanofi 2 years ago, at that time, I was the vice president of account management for Sanofi and the Sanofi Genzyme products. And then, as you mentioned earlier, I've spent the last 2 years with Cipla Therapeutics. So very traditional, weave in a little bit of marketing, didn't do a lot of operations, but a lot of reimbursement experience. And it's good to be here. So thank you.
It's great to have you here. I didn't know that you worked at HMR. I really wish I took that bet when they said, "Can you incorporate Hearst into a situation?"
Yeah.
On September 9th, I'm like, "No, it's impossible." And there we go. We nailed it.
Well, I mean, in 22 and a half years, what was Marion Merrill Dow to Hearst to Rome Poulenc Roar to Aventus to Sanofi Aventus to Sanofi Genzyme to Sanofi, I just couldn't take any more name changes. So at that point is when I made a career change.
All good.
We're all going to work for Pfizer and Merck eventually. They're going to buy everybody eventually. So.
I don't know, Aaron.
I love it. Well, if you're the business card supplier for that former organization, you have retired wealthy. That is for sure. All right, so let's get wealthy with knowledge by bringing in Bob Lemke from Mobile Locker. Bob, it is great to have you here. Welcome to the summit.
Hey, gang. How are you? Great to be here. Frank, thanks as always for having me. It's great to be with you. And Jim and Aaron, great to see you guys.
Well, when we talk about kind of like this exceptional integrated kind of customer engagement piece, what's really cool is that, there are tools, there's tech that we'll have to talk about along the way. But ultimately, what does that mean to an outcome that has impact, that allows someone to feel value and perhaps, take action? Bob, I don't want to miss the opportunity to cover your background. You're a tech guy by background. Can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up professionally?
Yeah, so I'm probably the odd guy out here in terms of the fact that I did not grow up in pharma and biotech. I grew up actually more in tech, so providing solutions and services to that industry, right? So long kind of background career doing that type of work. Currently work for Mobile Locker as the Chief Revenue Officer, equity partner here. But prior to that, I've worked for numerous very large companies, the likes of Salesforce.com, Oracle's, IBM's of the world, to small startup type organizations as well. So I've kind of covered the gamut from big to small to middle, and really historically in some form or fashion, sales leadership. Back and forth, though, I've kind of moved in and out of carrying bags and being sales leadership in various forms. So I have people ask me all the time what I want to be when I grow up because of that, because I want to sell and I want to lead and I want to manage and I want to do all these different things. But at the end of the day, I think where I love being is at the front line, just delivering value, working with clients, driving success. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here at Mobile Locker. So.
Excellent. Well, that parallels the topic, for today in helping us be successful with the different stakeholders that we serve. And I want to start off the conversation by going to Aaron. Aaron, leveraging your current ops and analytics responsibilities. Help us for those of us that are not in that role. When you think about what the industry's gone through in the recent couple years, I don't want to over-index the pandemic stuff, but from a sales perspective, it's made us really think differently about what we're doing, how we're doing it, but making sense of the data. So for all of the different exposures to the brand through perhaps digital and other platforms, not just the salesperson, how have operation teams had to evolve to bring these insights and turn it into something actionable for our commercial folks?
Yeah, it's a great question, Frank. I think we're still learning. Certainly multi-channel marketing is not new. We've been doing it for decades at this point. But I think COVID certainly has put more of a spotlight and more of an emphasis on non-personal promotion or other methodologies of contacting physicians. So I kind of break it into a couple different ways is how does operations look at this stuff, and what is the frequency of how often are we getting data? How often are we doing that initiative? Is this a one-time initiative or is this something we're going to be doing frequently? So how often are we getting the data? So frequency definitely comes into play because that determines, is that something we're going to automate or is that something we just do manually via Excel, right? So for me, it's kind of a frequency question first. The second thing is a systems question, is if we've decided we're going to automate it, I think it's choosing a platform or helping or designing a platform that's flexible, that has the ability to take multiple different data sets in different formats, collect it, collate it, report it, but you've got to have more than one input going into that data stream. And so is your system flexible is a huge question for it. And do you have the ability to do a data cube where you can compare different data sets against each other. That's become very important. The other thing is the data itself. And it's having partnerships with the different sources. So whether that is a marketing vendor, whether that's doing direct emails to a physician, whether that is the CRM system where your sales reps or your telemarketing or your telehealth group is inputting data, having partnerships that everyone understands that there is a common denominator across physicians, for example. We need an MPI, we need an HCO number, that there are common denominators in order for us to cross-reference those different data sets. It can't just be your name. Listen, Aaron Riley is a relatively, unique name, but there's 18 ways to spell it. And sometimes people randomly throw an O in the front of it just because, but I'm always the same person. And so is there an identifier to help us get across the different sources? And then also an agreement across the organization that correlation is not always causation. So just because you're seeing something in one data set and you're seeing a similar result in another data set does not mean that they have caused one another. That there may be a correlation, but that doesn't mean causation. Did that answer your question?
That is, yeah, that's awesome, Aaron. I love it. And it makes me think about like the consequences of the data. And when it comes to like the sales teams, a bit, maybe Jim, you can weigh in on this a bit. If let's just go with HCPs. So an HCP has an interaction with the brand through these different channels, and the data is feeding in. So I am just thinking from a practical coaching standpoint, how is tracking and connecting the dots between all of these brand engagements between that singular HCP, kind of like changing the role, the responsibility of the field salesperson, or even the coaching model?
Yeah. So again, without over-indexing the pandemic, right? We were forced into a situation in 2020, March of 2020, the way that we operated. We didn't even have months to think about how we were going to operate, right? We had to change the way that we operated overnight, right? And so that became a real challenge for, if you were a large manufacturer with unlimited amounts of resources in dollars, your ability to engage quicker probably was an advantage. If you were with a smaller startup organization where resources aren't aplenty and you had a basic CRM platform and your ability to go digital, you looked at things very differently, and your sense of urgency was very different. One thing that what the last 18 months has certainly provided for us was, you better be prepared for the inevitable, right? In all the changes in the marketplace. We certainly as an industry got caught flat-footed in the way that we needed to communicate. Again, this is still a people business, right? When you're delivering clinical information, as much as I appreciate, Frank, you're allowing me to do this over this medium, I still think that I am a lot more effective if I'm sitting in front of you and we're having a dialogue. I can't control how many times people count my eyes blinking today. It's different to see my facial expression. Am I leaning in? You can't really see how emotional I am in this conversation, right? It just doesn't have the same impact. So my vote is for in-person interactions in the future, but we're going to have to get through the next couple of months, I would imagine. But we certainly, I'm not sure we could have ever predicted we would have been in this type of scenario, having this level of engagement 18 months after something started.
No doubt about it. And with the different research that we're all getting, and there's always a new headline every week, it seems, but it appears that this balance between in-person and virtual, at least if we want to have the type of message frequency and interaction between our sales teams, if you will, even medical affairs, we want to continue to have that hit rate. We're going to have to balance between face-to-face and virtual to some degree. That is for sure. In fact, I went to see my physician the other day, all for good things for sure, but we had a conversation about this very thing, and he's very industry friendly But for the physician organization that he works for, there's almost a guard at the building. In fact, I think there is a guard at the front of the building that's preventing those sorts of things. So he's going to be forced to be virtual during the workday, only face-to-face when he's comfortable getting out after hours. So that's going to bring me over to Bob next. And
hey,
Bob,
Frank, before you go to Bob, could I just elaborate on one thing? And it's interesting. It kind of builds off of what Aaron was talking about, data, right? Whether you're in market research or whether you lead a brand or whether you lead a field-based team, right? Like, as we look at trends in the business I'm in here today, my marketing team or people in market research would say, Jim, why are we seeing this particular trend? And I will be honest, it's hard to answer certain questions around some of your market research and some of your data right now, because we're delivering much of our message in a very different way than many of us that grew up in the industry. We're used to looking at what was the value of the call? What was the in-person? How much time did you spend with a provider? Right now we're looking at, did the person actually put their video on and actually look at your master visual aid while you're making the presentation? So the output of these calls and how we're measuring the impact has significantly changed in the last 18 months. Sorry, Bob, didn't want to jump in there, but I wanted to kind of build off of the strength of what Aaron brings to the conversation as well.
I totally agree. And so, Frank, before you bring me in, I want to make a couple of points really quick. So, Aaron, first of all, I'm a data analytics guy. So my background as selling technology, much of my background is data and analytics. So you are speaking my language, and from my perspective, there's nothing more important than that. But Jim, I wanted to make a point on something you said. When you mentioned something about when the pandemic hit, if you worked for a very large company, you had the resource and the capacity to react, right? And I wanted to make a comment on that, because interestingly enough, what we saw with a lot of our clients is the smaller companies were able to react faster because the big companies aren't set up to react quickly, right? Oftentimes, not always, but if very, very large companies are not necessarily known for their agility. They're not really known for their capacity to pivot on a dime. Whereas what we saw with a lot of our clients, and again, Frank, I don't know who even knows what Mobile Locker is or does, but what we saw with a lot of our clients is some of the smaller, more agile companies were able to react faster because of their sheer capacity to do so, right? And so that actually gave them a little bit of a, like a competitive nudge in that area, because they were in fact able to react a little faster than some of the very, very large companies. They just aren't built. They're just not built that way, right? So
yeah. No, great points, Bob. And when I think about these multi-channel activities, to identify where providers are intersecting with that message journey, I think is really important. How do we have weave that common thread through, so we know kind of like what's connected? If you're into sailing, we often have ropes that will have a certain color thread running through it. You know what it's attached to. And that's really important, I think, when we think about our messages and meeting the customer where she or he is on that message journey. So, Bob, this really is your opportunity to tell us a little bit more about kind of like, how are you guys trying to solve this problem of having to deal in an environment where, as a brand, whether you're a salesperson, marketer, medical affairs person, or otherwise, you're going to have to interact using different types of touch points. How do you guys help kind of like bring them together so I can have a complete picture and an educated picture when I finally end up talking to you, my customer?
Terrific. So really quick, it'll help for me just to kind of say kind of what Mobile Locker is and does, because I think that'll bring it all together. So what we do is we have a platform that is and we define it as it's an HCP engagement platform. So we sell our platform as a service, software as a service, to pharma companies. And the primary benefactor to what we do is field marketing, field sales. And we give them the ability to access, share, and track the content that they're providing through either marketing or field sales. MSL, medical affairs, also use us. But we give them the ability to gauge through insights the interaction that the HCPs, their targets, are having with their content. Content could be anything, by the way. It could be PDF, could be video, it can be anything. But once it's shared, whether it's virtual, any channel, we give them the ability to see what happened after they left. So did they open it? Where did they open it? Where were they when they opened it? What did they do with it? How long did they spend on it? Where inside a piece of content did they spend the most time? We can give page by page insights and analytics. And what that allows, and what we see our clients doing, is it gives them that insight to know where are they, when, what time do they engage, how do they engage, with what types of content does Dr. Frank like to engage, with what types of content when and where does Dr. Jim like to engage. And we provide that back not only to the rep, the field, the sender, but then we give macro level insights to people like Aaron, right, who can then take those insights and provide it to the content creators and give them insights as to what pieces of content are hitting, what are gaining attribution. And then, some of our clients also take those insights and they put it into the data lakes, the data warehouses, and they use that, to Aaron's point, as a data source to create that correlation doesn't mean causation type effect, right? So that's kind of what we do for our clients. And so we see this challenge firsthand every day around what is the best content channel? What is the best engagement channel? And all of that is deeply personalized and deeply unique, as we've talked about, to each individual HCP, right? Because they are kind of controlling the shots now, right? They are the ones telling the company, this is where I want to be marketed to, how I want it to be marketed to, with what type of content I want it to be marketed to. And so having those insights for each individual target customer is really, really, really valuable. So that's kind of how we roll.
That's cool. All right. I like how you guys roll. That's pretty cool. So Aaron, I want to have you help us out here a little bit. And again, I'm leaning on you because I know you're very savvy in turning data into insights here. And so can you help leaders out there watching right now that are saying, I need a framework for dealing with this situation, which is very common. I've got these ATU results. It looks like we're going in the right direction. We've got these social media impressions. It looks like we're going in the right direction. These folks are opening our emails. Our share of voice, however we're calculating, seems to be going in the right direction. Oh, by the way, we're way off goal. I know there's no perfect answer, but there's got to be some sort of framework. And I know that, so we've seen some of this kind of like before, and I want to make sure that we help leaders control their behaviors when they get to this very, very real place. So what advice do you have for them?
It's the $1 million question, right? It's the how do we reconcile it all? And the challenge with data is you can make data tell whatever story you want it to tell. So that's part of the challenge. Data is data, but you can tell a story with it. And most people try and tell the good news. And so it's, yes, our ATUs are up, and yes, our clicks are up, and we always want the good stuff. It comes back to that correlation causation. And I think of the selling cycle as a funnel, more than a circle, right? Because there are many steps between clicking a website or liking a post on Instagram to actually finding a patient who wants to be prescribed to the patient actually showing up at the pharmacy, and then to Jim's world of managed care is, will the payer even pay for it? Is there pre-authorization? Does the patient give up and abandon it? So there's so many steps between that, across all of the funnel where there is opportunity for leakage. And so I think it's identifying and looking at the big trends to say, where is the leaks? Like, where is there the opportunity that it went from we love you to sales are not quite what you expected them to be, because there's lots of different places where it can go wrong. I think also to what we've been talking about is it's also really hard to identify one pinpoint of this is the thing that's causing this physician to write. I think especially with COVID, so many companies are throwing everything against the wall. We're trying live, we're trying emails, we're trying internet, we're trying Zooms, we're trying, you pick it and people are trying it. And because there's so many things coming at physicians at once, it's hard to even pinpoint and say, that's the lever that's causing prescriptions to go up, or that's the lever that's causing prescriptions to go down. And I think that's part of our challenge, even before COVID, but certainly with COVID, it's gotten even more exacerbated.
I love it. So Jim, you want to build on that?
Yeah, it's interesting as Aaron is saying that, and after hearing what Bob was sharing with us, I agree with all they were saying. But when you look at the time, if you're in a calendar year, if you're with an organization is on the calendar year right now, again, I'm going to tap into when I was in a marketing team. You're probably deep or at the end of your brand planning cycle right now, planning for 2022. Now, again, in the role that I play today, it's in market access and customer facing. So I get pulled into brand planning a little bit, but not quite as much as I did if I was leading a P&L. I can only imagine the discussions that are going on around 2022 brand planning and budgeting, because again, when you look at the way that you're going to have impact on the providers, and is that having impact? Listen, as a sales leader, I always talk about don't confuse effort with results, right? I always say at the end of the day, you still have to see pen to pad, and is our efforts and our activities having an impact that's driving some element of business. But what's created the last 18 months is it's really hard to trust all of the data and what you've been doing the last 18 months. Is it having the desired impact that which you would hope? Really, the only way as a sales lead you can validate that is, am I on trend? And if I am on trend, then our activities must therefore be having an impact. But it's really hard to trust a lot of different things the last 18 months.
And I'm not going to knock Bob, but I will say, I always struggle with the CRM analytics because, again, having carried the bag and knowing what I would do, if I had an IBA and I was on page 3 for 10 minutes, I probably wasn't talking about that page for 10 minutes. We were probably talking about the upcoming Eagles game on Sunday, right? So that's always the challenge is you have to take it all with a grain of salt and look for big trends. The farther you try and dig down, the harder it gets.
Yeah, so I'm going to make a couple comments. First of all, I agree with that statement. It's not knocking me in, and there's mechanisms to kind of find that kind of stuff, context. So you have to apply context to any piece of data, right? I think so. So one of the things I see happen so often is that people, to your point about you can make it data say anything you want, well, without context, that is 100% true, right? No matter what it is, if you take a bunch of data and don't apply all the appropriate context to it, you can have the outcome be whatever it is you want. We see that in politics. We see that in all sorts of different things, right? So context to me is really everything. And then the thing that I wanted to touch on where you were talking as well, Aaron, about you made the comment about people are just trying things. They're throwing things up against the wall. We see it all the time with our clients as well. And the piece that we push really hard on with our clients is the measurement piece, right? So if you can't measure it, right? It's the old saying, if you can't manage what you can't measure, right? Or what you don't measure, and more importantly. So they're trying all this stuff, but they're not kind of taking the time and to kind of take a step back to your point, right? If if a thing was open, if a thing was open for 10 minutes, it probably wasn't being talked about for 10 minutes. But you have to kind of dig into that from a measurement perspective, right? And then apply all that measurement to what makes sense. Then you do begin to identify some of the what's working. You can begin to build some best practice. You can begin to say, okay, this seems to be working. Let's apply it as best practice. And that's how you find out, oh, maybe it is working because now it's working, tenfold or whatever it might be. So, but the key to that whole thing is that measurement piece. And I can't get over how many people forget that piece.
And I love what you said, because it is time, right? I mean, again, I'm seeing it right now, even with my organization. They try something, and if in 6 weeks the sales haven't increased, we abandon it and we go on to something else. And it's like you're not changing behavior that fast.
Right.
Yeah. What's interesting, the last 18 months, I think it's whether you're in commercial organization, regardless of where you sit in the organization, everybody had to sharpen their skills very, very quickly, overnight. And if you were in a brand that was a market leader, it almost became a level playing field very quickly, because to your point, who could get to market quicker with a new medium, with an impactful communication? It was a really interesting dynamic. And we've all learned about, we're going to have to start operating more on our toes versus being caught on our heels in the future.
Yep. I want to build on that a little bit, Jim. I want to stick with you. Behind at least the sales numbers, statistics, spreadsheets, PowerPoints, ultimately is a representation of how the market is behaving, right down to perhaps the individual level. How many patients are on drug, adherence, all that sort of jazz. And I think for our sales folks, I want to take this, if we're creating these exceptional experiences, I believe, by the way, my father would talk about this whole thing, like, effort and impact all the time, for sure. It's like, how are we helping our folks in the sales role evolve so they can be successful in today's environment? Say this environment continues with a, online, offline, kind of like back and forth, where they can connect the dots and really create an exceptional experience. So you got some data, you got some insights, that's awesome. But does the how the rep does what the rep does really count and drive it? How do we help them create a better experience?
Yeah, I'm only going to speak to my own individual experience. I've had to modify my behaviors, right? I've had to reset my expectations, right? We are facing, where you could go out and spend time with whether it is a sales leader or an account manager or a sales professional, and you can go into marketplaces right now and spend 1 or 2 days and not get into an office, not get into an institution, right? So how you coach people during this environment and how you keep them motivated to continue to take those swings at the plate has changed. Again, it doesn't mean that we don't still live up and hold people and hold them accountable and set high expectations, but we've had to be more empathetic and provide more grace in a very undefined marketplace. And again, it's not that we're not, as sales leaders, going to call balls and strikes. We are, but we've had to modify our own behaviors as well and recognize that the landscape has changed around us. And in some cases, we're catching up to the market. And the minute you catch up to the market, guess what? It shifts again. And that's what we've had to do. So it's been the best and worst experience of my 25 years in the industry.
I love it. It. Great. Aaron, let me ask you one of our kind of concluding questions. I'd like everybody to weigh in on this, please. And that is, we came together today to talk a bit about, trying to have a brand breakthrough, create, an exceptional integrated customer experience. From whatever point of view you prefer, what advice do you give our leaders of industry right now, and how they may play a role with everything that's going on to really create that exceptional integrated customer experience?
It's a great question. I think from all of my lenses, I think it's 2 things. I think it's transparency and making sure that everyone understands the context and the caveats and what things we have and what things we don't have and what we know and what we don't know. So I think there's transparency. I think it's also even transparency as far as granular as if the marketing team is going to send out an email to physicians, the rep should know about it, right? So I think there's transparency so everyone understands what's happening in their brand, in their market. And it's patience. I think it's kind of what we talked about, which is that idea of, throwing something and trying to measure it within 6 weeks. This is such a shifting sands right now game that we have that, everything's going to take a little bit longer to see what works. So I think it's transparency and patience are probably my 2 guiding principles right now.
That's sage advice. So Bob, when you think about all of the different companies that you and your team talk to all the time, they either have problems they know about, or there are problems that they're not yet quite identified, but you guys have a solution. What advice do you have when it comes to the problems that you see that organizations have in common right now that you guys are helping to solve?
So I think one of the things that I'll echo from the previous session, which I thought was really compelling, is what they talked about, this idea of, in this environment, which is so dynamic, so fluid, so uncertain, to be careful about taking on these big giant movements, these big giant projects that have impact 6, 10, 12 months down the road, right? So you're going to invest a bunch of time, energy, resource for an impact and an outcome that is potentially a year out. I would argue that it's reasonable to find opportunity that is deployable through a lens of agility, where you can deploy, put something, a tool, something in the hands of the people that need it quickly, include context, include measurement tools, all of those types of things, but give it to them quickly and anticipate results in a shorter way, and measure those results and make sure that those results, again, are not just correlation, but measure those results, because the problem with anything longer term or really long term is this whole concept of, everything's moving, everything's changing. So I think, what we try and talk to our clients about is, what is it going to hurt to get going, right? What is it going to hurt to get started? What is it going to hurt to get this in the hands of the reps who are screaming for this information, right? They're screaming for actionable intelligence, right? How can you help me do my job better, faster today, right? And those are the kinds of things that we try and talk to our clients about, because, everything is moving so fast that if you get too deep and too involved in really complex processes and complex projects, by the time you see any fruit from them, the market will have shifted.
Yep. So Jim, you're going to bring us home here when it comes to advice. Everyone really does want to create an exceptional customer experience, because that is the unlock key to help us deliver value to patients, which is why we're all here. What advice do you have to leaders to help them do that?
Get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? That's again, I'm 25 years in the industry, so I'm on the second half of that, right? But here's my prediction. Unfortunately, we as a country got caught on our heels. I've said this now 2 times. And people ended up with a virus they didn't know about. They ended up with 7 days in a hospital, ended up with healthcare costs that they weren't predicting, right? So we have the greatest healthcare system in the world. We have the greatest innovation. We have the greatest medicine, the greatest physicians, the greatest institutions in the world. Unfortunately, we have the most unaffordable healthcare system in the world. And so all the pandemic did was really put a bullseye on the fact that we still have more work to do when it comes to healthcare affordability and what that's going to look like. Now, I'm not passing judgment on our current healthcare system and reimbursement, but I'm pretty sure we all agree that there's going to be change coming in any direction. It's going to have to happen. So just get comfortable being uncomfortable. If you thought it was uncomfortable before the pandemic, just imagine what it's going to be like after the pandemic. So just enjoy it. I'm glad I'm 25 years in.
Those are great comments, Jim. And, it is interesting if you do look, I'm a little bit of an industry historian, but when you think about the branches of government plus public attitude, our industry has never been in this same place since the Carter administration. So I think to your point about kind of like buckle up, get ready, it's going to get interesting, it seems history is on your side when it comes to that advice, for sure. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So for everyone, Bob Lemke from Mobile Locker, you can find him on LinkedIn. Follow him, please. If there was some value, please let him know. Erin Riley from FFM Biosciences, you can find her as well. That's one L in the Riley, no O in front. But please follow her if she helped you out today. And Jim Wentworth at Cipla. I just want to thank all three of you for your time and treasures. If someone's that much better, sharper, faster at the next meeting because of your gifts today, I can tell you that we're all grateful because we're in this together to help deliver value for patients, providers, and beyond. So on that note, thank the three of you for your time today.
Great privilege, all you guys.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Frank.
Have a great day.
Thanks,
All right,
Aaron. Thanks, Bob.
everybody. We'll see you in the next session, everybody. Thank you.